My name is Lori Whitmore, 26 years old, and the night my parents threw me out like I was nothing, I was standing inside a building I quietly owned. They didn't know. Not about the penthouse, not about the company, not about me. All they saw was the same worthless daughter they had spent years breaking down. And as my suitcase hit the marble floor of the lobby, I realized something cold, something final. This wasn't the night I lost everything. This was the night they did. I grew up in a house where love felt conditional. My parents adored my older brother, Daniel. He was the golden child, straight A's, football captain, charming smile, the kind of son they proudly introduced to everyone. And then there was me, quiet, observant, always trying, never enough. If Daniel scored a goal, it was a family celebration. If I brought home perfect grades, my mom would just nod and say, "That's expected." It didn't matter how hard I worked. In their eyes, I was always lacking something they could never quite name, but never stopped punishing me for. By the time I turned 16, the insults became routine. "You'll never survive in the real world," my father would say, barely looking up from his phone. My mother was worse in a quieter way. She didn't yell. She dismissed. "Some people just are built for success, Lori. You should learn to accept your limits." Those words didn't just hurt, they settled inside me like poison. And for a while, I believed them. I believed I was less, that I was destined to fail, that maybe they were right. But something changed when I left for college. Not because they supported me, they didn't. I worked jobs, skipped meals, stayed up nights studying while exhaustion clawed at my body. I chose business, not because it was easy, but because I wanted control. Control over my life, control over my worth. And slowly, painfully, I started building something. Freelance work turned into consulting. Consulting turned into a small startup. And that startup became something much bigger than I ever imagined. I never told them. Not when I landed my first major client. Not when I moved into a modest apartment downtown. And definitely not when I quietly purchased a luxury penthouse through my company's holding account. It wasn't about hiding success, it was about protecting it. Because deep down, I knew if they saw me rising, they wouldn't celebrate. They'd try to take it, twist it, own it. So I stayed silent. Let them believe their version of me. Let them underestimate me. Then came the night everything snapped. It was Daniel's engagement party. Of course, it was hosted at our family home, the same place where I learned how invisible I was. I almost didn't go, but a small part of me still hoped maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see me, acknowledge me. I arrived in a simple black dress, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, just present. That was all I wanted to be. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The tension, the judgment. My mother's eyes scanned me from head to toe before she forced a tight smile. "You actually showed up," she said, as if it surprised her. Daniel barely acknowledged me, too busy laughing with his fiancé's family, wealthy, polished, everything my parents admired. I stood there for a moment, feeling like an outsider in the house I grew up in. And then my father's voice cut through the noise, sharp and cold. "Lori, can we talk?" We stepped into his office, the same room where I'd been lectured, criticized, diminished for years. He closed the door behind me, and I felt it again, that old, suffocating weight. "You embarrassed us tonight," he said flatly. I blinked, confused. "I just arrived," I replied. His jaw tightened. "Exactly. Look at you. No partner, no real career, nothing to show. And yet you walk in here like you belong." The words hit harder than I expected, because some part of me still cared. "I do have a career," I said quietly, trying to steady my voice. My father laughed, actually laughed. "Doing what? Those little online jobs? Lori, you're 26. It's time to stop pretending." My chest tightened, but I didn't respond. I couldn't, not yet, because if I opened my mouth, everything would come out. And I wasn't ready. Not like this. Not in this room. That's when my mother walked in. She didn't ask what was happening. She already knew. "We've been talking," she said calmly, folding her arms. "And we think it's time you stop relying on us." I frowned. "I don't rely on you," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "You live in that tiny apartment, struggling, barely surviving. It's pathetic, Laurie. We can't keep pretending you're something you're not." My stomach dropped. This wasn't concern. This was something else. Then my father said it. The sentence that changed everything. "You're not welcome here anymore." The words echoed in the room. Heavy, final. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "Pack whatever you left here," he added. "And don't come back until you've become someone worth knowing." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a door closing for the last time. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded, walked upstairs, packed the few things I had left in that house. Each step felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. When I came back down, the party was still going, laughter, music, celebration, and there I was, carrying my past in a single suitcase. No one stopped me. No one cared. I walked out the front door, the cold night air hitting my face like a wake-up call. And as I stood there, alone, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. They really believed I was nothing. Completely, absolutely. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to prove them wrong with words, because the truth was already waiting for me, just a few blocks away, in a building they would never imagine I owned. I picked up my suitcase, took a slow breath, and started walking. The walk felt longer than it actually was. Every step echoed with their voices in my head, worthless. Nothing, not enough. The city lights blurred around me, not because I was lost, but because something inside me was shifting. I wasn't crying. That was the strange part. After everything they had just said, I felt calm, cold, almost like the part of me that kept begging for their approval had finally gone silent. When I reached the building, I paused for a moment outside the glass doors. It stood tall and elegant, glowing softly against the dark sky. People like my parents admired places like this, but only from a distance. They would never imagine I belonged here. I adjusted my grip on the suitcase and stepped inside, heels clicking against the polished floor. The security guard looked up immediately, his expression shifting the moment he recognized me. "Good evening, Ms. Whitmore," he said respectfully. I nodded, offering a small smile. "Evening, James." The one simple exchange felt heavier than anything that had happened tonight. Respect, acknowledgement, things I had spent years chasing at home and found effortlessly here. I walked past the lobby, straight toward the private elevator. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored Will's same face, same person. But something in my eyes had changed. Something stronger, something that no longer needed permission to exist. As the elevator doors closed and began to rise, I let out a slow breath. The silence inside was almost comforting. No judgment, no criticism, just space. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of the night settle. They had thrown me out like I had nothing, like I was nothing. And yet, in a few seconds, those same people, if they ever stepped into this building, would be standing inside something that belonged entirely to me. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, revealing a wide, open space filled with soft lighting and floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass, glowing like a sea of stars. I stepped inside, placing my suitcase near the entrance, and just stood there for a moment. This place, it wasn't just expensive, it was earned. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every silent terror was all here, built into these walls. I walked slowly toward the window, wrapping my arms around myself as I looked down at the city below. This was my life now, not the version my parents believed in, not the broken, dependent girl they kept trying to fix. This was real, and yet, despite everything, there was still a small ache in my chest, because no matter how far I had come, a part of me had wanted them to see it, to be proud, even just once. My phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Daniel? Of course. I hesitated before answering, already knowing this wouldn't be a kind call. What? I said flatly. There was a pause, then his voice sharp, irritated. What the hell was that tonight? You made things awkward. I let out a quiet breath. I didn't do anything, he scoffed. Exactly. You just stood there like you didn't belong. Mom's upset. I closed my eyes for a second, letting his words settle without reacting. She's always upset with me, I replied calmly. Another pause. Then he said something that almost made me laugh. Look, Laurie, maybe it's better if you just stay away for a while. You don't fit into this life. The irony of it hit me so hard, I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. You don't fit into this life. If only he knew. Yeah, I said quietly. You're right. He didn't notice the shift in my tune. Or maybe he didn't care. Good, he replied quickly. It's better for everyone. And then he hung up, just like that. No hesitation, no second thought. I stared at the screen for a moment before slowly lowering my hand. That was it. No more pretending. No more shrinking myself to make them comfortable. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen lit up instantly, revealing emails, reports, numbers, my real world, my real identity. There was one message in particular waiting for me, an invitation. Daniel's wedding venue had reached out earlier that week, finalizing ownership confirmations for the Penthouse event space on the rooftop level. My lips curved slightly as I read it again. They had no idea. They had booked their entire wedding after party in a building owned by the daughter they just threw away. And suddenly, for the first time that night, I smiled. I stared at that email longer than I should have, reading every line like it meant something more than it did. The rooftop, the penthouse lounge, full access granted to the Whitmore family for Daniel's wedding after party. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. They had planned the most important night of their lives, inside something I built in silence. And somehow, they still believed I was nothing. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath as a quiet realization settled in. This wasn't just coincidence. This was opportunity, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the kind that unfolds slowly, carefully, like a story that's been waiting for the right moment to be told. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to prove anything with anger. The truth was already powerful enough. All I had to do was let them walk straight into it. The next few days passed in a strange calm. I went back to work like nothing had happened, handling meetings, reviewing contracts, making decisions that moved millions without anyone questioning me. No one here saw me as weak. No one here doubted my place. And yet, every now and then, my mind drifted back to that night, to my father's voice, to my mother's cold eyes, to the way they closed that door like I didn't matter. By the time the wedding day arrived, I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to avoid it. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to be there, not as the daughter they dismissed, but as the woman they never took the time to know. I chose my outfit carefully, not flashy, not attention-seeking, just elegant, controlled, the kind of presence that doesn't beg to be noticed, but is impossible to ignore once seen. The ceremony was held at a luxury venue across the city, filled with people who looked like they belonged in a magazine. Perfect smiles, perfect conversations, perfect lives. I arrived quietly, slipping into a seat near the back. No one greeted me. No one questioned me. I was invisible again. And this time, I let it happen. Because invisibility can be powerful when you know something no one else does. I watched as Daniel stood at the altar, confident, proud, completely unaware of the storm waiting just a few hours ahead. My parents sat in the front row, glowing with pride, soaking in every second of attention. This was their moment, their perfect family image on display. And for a brief second, I felt the old ache again, that small, fragile part of me that still wondered what it would feel like to be looked at like that. The vows were exchanged. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. It was beautiful in the way things are when they're carefully constructed to look flawless. And as everyone began moving toward the reception and after party, I stayed back for a moment, watching it all unfold, because I knew something they didn't. The real story hadn't even started yet. When I finally arrived at the building later that evening, the rooftop was already alive with music and laughter. Lights shimmered across the skyline, champagne glasses clinked, and guests admired the view like it was something rare. I stepped out of the elevator quietly, blending into the crowd once again. Staff members nodded subtly as they passed me, their recognition hidden behind professionalism. Everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. I spotted my parents almost immediately. My mother was speaking to a group of guests, proudly describing the venue. "It's one of the most exclusive properties in the city," she said with a confident smile. "We spared no expense." I felt something shift inside me at those words. Not anger, not even pain, just clarity, because she truly believed this was hers to claim, that everything around her existed because of their status. Daniel joined her moments later, raising a glass as he laughed with his new wife. "Best decision we made," he said. "Only the best for tonight." I took a slow step forward, my heels barely making a sound against the floor. They were so comfortable, so certain, so completely unaware of what was standing just a few feet away from them. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one out of place. I moved closer, just enough to hear every word, every laugh, every careless assumption. My father's voice cut through the noise as he spoke to a group of investors. "You have to understand," he said proudly, "everything we have, we built from the ground up." I almost smiled at that, because standing there, surrounded by everything I had built, I realized something quietly powerful. They had spent their entire lives underestimating me, and tonight, they were about to understand exactly how wrong they were. I stood there for a moment longer, letting their words settle into the air like something fragile, something about to break. The music swelled around us, glasses clinked, laughter echoed across the rooftop, but all I could hear was my father's voice repeating in my head, "Everything we have, we built." I took a slow breath, straightened my posture, and stepped forward, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be seen. "Did you?" I said calmly. The conversation round them paused. My mother turned first, her smile fading the second she saw me. "Laurie," she said, confusion tightening her voice. My father's expression shifted into irritation almost instantly. "What are you doing here?" he asked, like I had no right to exist in that space. I held his gaze, steady, unshaken. "I was invited," I replied simply. It wasn't a lie, just not the version of truth they expected. Daniel let out a small, dismissive laugh, stepping closer with a glass in his hand. "You really don't know when to stay away, do you?" he said under his breath. His wife glanced between us, uncomfortable but silent. I didn't respond to him, not yet, because this moment, it wasn't about reacting, it was about revealing, slowly, carefully, letting them feel it piece by piece. My mother forced a tight smile, clearly aware of the eyes watching us now. "This isn't the time for whatever this is," she said quietly. "You've already caused enough tension." I tilted my head slightly, my voice still calm. "Tension," I repeated. I thought everything here was perfect. The way I said it made something flicker across her face in certainty. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "No." His tone was the same one he used the night he threw me out. Final, dismissive, certain. And for a second, the memory hit me like a wave. The suitcase, the door closing, the silence after. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't break. I just looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. "No," I said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be, but it stopped everything. Daniel's smile disappeared. My mother's hand tightened around her glass. Even the conversations nearby seemed to quiet, like the entire room felt something shift. My father's jaw clenched, "Excuse me?" he said, not used to resistance. "Not from me. Not ever." I reached into my bag slowly, pulling out a small, simple envelope. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just paper. I held it between my fingers for a second before placing it gently on the table in front of them. "You should read that," I said. My voice didn't shake, not even a little, because I already knew what was inside and what it would do. My mother hesitated before picking it up, her fingers slightly unsteady now. She opened it carefully, unfolding the document inside. At first, her expression didn't change. Then it did. Her eyes scanned the page again, slower this time. Her lips parted slightly, like she was trying to speak, but couldn't find the words. "What is this?" she whispered. Daniel leaned over, grabbing the paper from her hand, his confidence still intact until it wasn't. I watched it happen in real time. The moment his expression shifted, the moment the arrogance cracked. This isn't funny," he said quickly, but his voice had lost its edge. My father snatched the document next, irritation turning into something sharper, something closer to fear. "It's ownership verification," I said quietly. He looked up at me, confusion written all over his face. "Ownership of what?" he demanded. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment settle into every corner of that rooftop. And then I said it, calm, clear, unavoidable. "This building." The words didn't explode. They didn't need to. They landed slowly and sank deep. My mother took a step back, her hand covering her mouth. Daniel shook his head, like denying it would somehow make it disappear. "No," he muttered. "That's not possible." My father stared at the paper again, his hands gripping it tighter now. "This has to be some kind of mistake," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. I held his gaze, unflinching. "It's not." And for the first time in their lives, they had nothing to say. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy. It pressed against everyone in that room, suffocating the laughter, swallowing the music, freezing conversations mid-sentence. My father's hand trembled slightly as he held the document, reading it again like the words might rearrange themselves into something less threatening. My mother looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, and Daniel, for the first time in his life, had no clever remark to hide behind. "You're lying," my father finally said, but the confidence was gone. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was a desperate attempt to hold onto control. I didn't react. I simply reached into my bag again and pulled out my phone, unlocking it with a calm precision. A few taps later, I turned the screen toward them. Financial statements, property registration, my name clear, undeniable. "I don't need you to believe me," I said quietly. "The truth doesn't depend on that." My mother shook her head slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you hide this?" There it was. Not "how did you do it?" Not "we're proud of you." Just confusion that I didn't play the role they had assigned me. I let out a soft breath, meeting her eyes. "Because every time I showed you something good, you turned it into something small," I said. "So I stopped showing you." The honesty in my voice cut deeper than anger ever could. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly now, his perfect composure unraveling. "This doesn't change anything," he said quickly. "You're still you." I almost smiled at that. "Exactly," I replied. "I'm still me, the same person you all dismissed. The difference is, now you can't ignore it." His silence after that was louder than anything he could have said. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice like this could still be contained. "Listen to me," he said, his tone shifting into something almost persuasive. "If this is true, we can figure this out as a family." I stared at him for a long second, letting those words sink in. As a family, the same family that threw me out without hesitation, the same family that called me worthless without regret. "No," I said calmly, "you don't get to use that word now." The finality in my voice made him stop completely. My mother's eyes filled with something unfamiliar regret. Maybe a realization. "Laurie," she started, but I gently shook my head. Not out of anger, not out of cruelty, just clarity. I spent years trying to be enough for you, I said softly, and the moment I stopped, I became everything you said I couldn't be. Around us, people were watching now, whispers spreading. The perfect image they had built was cracking in real time, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I glanced around the rooftop, the lights, the skyline, the life I had built piece by piece, and felt something settle inside me. Not revenge, not bitterness, just peace. I took a small step back, creating distance not just physically, but emotionally. Enjoy the rest of your night, I said, my voice steady. Everything here is already paid for. The subtle weight of those words didn't go unnoticed. It wasn't just a statement. It was a reminder of who I was, of what I had done, of everything they chose not to see. I turned before they could respond, walking toward the elevator with the same quiet confidence I arrived with. No one stopped me this time. No one questioned me, because now they knew. The doors opened, and as I stepped inside, I caught one last glimpse of them standing together, but somehow more distant than ever. And as the doors closed, I realized something that took me years to understand. Being rejected by them was never my loss. It was my freedom.